Shane VanGisbergen shocks the world. Well, maybe not the world, because I did call it in the pre-race. Let's talk about it. Coming up next. What is going on, everyone? Hope you are doing good on this Monday. All right, one race, one win for the Kiwi, the Australian V8 Supercar, three-time champion SVG, gets it done on the streets of Chicago. A lot of people were saying, oh, he went in there and he embarrassed all these NASCAR drivers. I don't think that is so much the case, and what I think that the people that are saying that are not taking into account, NASCAR has never raced this car on a street course. And this car, when it was built, resembles more a Australian V8 Supercar than any car that NASCAR has raced in the past. And if you look throughout the field, who has the most experience driving this type of car or on a street course? Without a doubt, it had to be Shane VanGisbergen. So that is why I picked him in the pre-race to win this race. So it was not a shock to me. I don't understand why a lot of people were shocked by this or thinks that he embarrassed all these other NASCAR drivers who do this for a living or whatever. Because to me, if you just look through the field, who had the most experience on a track that nobody had ever raced before, which is another factor, nobody had raced this track before. To me, he just stood out. He had to be the obvious favorite, especially when you started looking at practice times and things like that. It just kept jumping out to you that this guy has got probably the best chance to win this race if you look at all of the things on paper. So to me, it was not a huge surprise, but shout out to him. Also, shout out to Trackhouse. Not only did they go back-to-back because Ross Chastain won last week, but a lot of people had been saying that these superstar cars or whatever you want to call them, the Project 91 type cars, were just money grabs. Well, Trackhouse proved with this win that it is not just a money grab. They're going out there with a crew chief like Darian Grubb. How can you call this a money grab? Going out there with cars that are built to win races. So going forward, anybody that sits in the Project 91 car or any other of these superstar cars that are offered by these other teams, they know that they've got a chance to win in these cars. So I think going forward, this is going to be a really good thing because not only do you got superstars from other motorsports coming in here, but they know when they sit in these type of cars, they do have a chance to win. So huge win. And the first time I think in like 60 years that somebody has come in and won their first ever NASCAR start. So just a really cool story. Just a lot of significance to it. So I think it was a cool story at the end of the day. Now let's get on to the Chicago race itself because that was a hot button issue. So I ran a poll and 56 on the live stream last night, 56% of you thought that it was a good race, and about 17% of you thought that it was bailed out by a good finish. So what was the Chicago weekend overall? Well, we know the good. I just talked about the good, right? And I think the racing on the track was fairly good too. There were passing zones. I was scared there was going to be no passing, but people were able to pass. If you were riding on board with SVG, you saw him go all the way through the field if you were watching on YouTube. So the passing was not an issue. That was my big concern with it, and I'm glad I was super wrong about that. So the racing itself was good. Now, the things that other people wanted to point to, and you knew, like, some people are just never going to say this was a good race because they just don't want this to be a good race for whatever reason. Brett Griffin is one of them. So if you look at the actual weekend, though, you can't control the rain, but if you were at a racetrack, there are some other measures you could take into place to where this wouldn't have had so many negatives. Because I felt like all the way up to this race, everything that could go wrong for Chicago was going wrong. So luckily the race itself was good, and they did have that good finish. But you had the concerts canceled. You had the really expensive tickets. You had the Xfinity race that was cut. I don't think they even ran 20 laps in the Xfinity race. And it was cut short, and they announced the winner because you can't run it on a Monday or anything like that because it's a street course. So going forward, these are issues you're going to have to look at. So it wasn't like a perfect race and everything didn't go right. But given the overall positive feeling I think that most people have from this race, I think you will probably see street races in the future of NASCAR. And if they do continue to have street races in the future for NASCAR, I think one thing that they need to look at is moving it around. They don't need to have it at the same place every time. Like, okay, we do Chicago this year. Next year you do Detroit. Next year you do Montreal. Move it around so that it's always fresh from year to year. Same thing that the NFL does with the Super Bowl, right? They move the Super Bowl around every year. That way, it's always going to help attendance, and it's always going to be special because it's always going to have a theme going to a new city. So if they keep the street race, they definitely need to move it around, in my opinion. But once again, shout out to SVG. He wins the race. So actually, interesting for that also is that the points, right? Nobody locked into the points because somebody not running for points won the race. First time since AJ Allmendinger, and ironically, the time before that was Justin Haley, who finished second in this race. Speaking of which, let's look at good race, bad race. Good race for SVG, as already mentioned. Justin Haley, like I said, he needed that second place finish. Man, I know he wanted to get that win. And even with 15-lap older tires, he put on a heck of a drive. Don't forget he had 15-lap older tires, and tire fall-off was significant at this racetrack. He put up a valiant effort to hold off Shane VanGisbergen, but at the end of the day, came up a little short. Good points day for Chase Elliott. He is now only 55 points behind the cut line. We'll look at the points here in just a second. Kyle Larson finishes 4th. Kyle Busch finishes 5th. Austin Cindric was 6th. Michael McDowell was 7th, and Joey Logano 8th. Ty Gibbs 9th. Good run for Ty Gibbs. He bumps himself into the playoffs as it stands right now. Like I said, we'll look at that in just a minute. Chris Buescher finishes 10th, and then Denny Hamlin, Eric Almirola, William Byron, and Corey LaJoie finish out your top 14. Good run for Corey LaJoie. He needed that momentum after that treacherous, of course, run for the 9 car with Hendrick. Now let's go on to bad race. Bad race, unfortunately, for Noah Gragson. He hit the same spot on the track like probably 5 times. Really bad race for him. A bad race for Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. At one point looked like he had a car that might contend for the win. All of the Toyotas did, actually. Looked like they had cars to contend for the win, but for whatever reason, they all fell out, mostly due to errors, driver error. Christopher Bell was another one. I had driver error there. Who was another one? Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick looked like he had a really good car. Driver error took him out of it as well. And also Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon was out there going for it, going for the win. So I'm not going to hate on him going for the win because he was going for it there, trying to get past the 31. I think he knew the 91 was coming. He was trying to get in front of the 31 so he could get as big a gap as possible to possibly hold off that 91. But at the end of the day, he pushed it too hard and wrecked. So it was a bad race for Austin Dillon too. Also trying to lock himself into the playoffs. So I feel like crash or go home was his mentality there. And, well, he crashed and went home. So there you go. Now let's look at the points. Martin Truex Jr., William Byron, Ross Chastain, Christopher Bell, Kyle Busch are your top 5 in points as it stands right now. Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Chris Buescher, Tyler Reddick, Brad Keselowski, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Bubba Wallace 15th. Then your last man in right now, as mentioned earlier, is Ty Gibbs. Your first guys out are going to be Daniel Suarez, Michael McDowell, AJ Allmendinger, Alex Bowman, Justin Haley, Austin Cindric, Corey LaJoie, and Chase Elliott, 55 points out. All of those drivers sitting right there on that line have a chance to race their way in. They can still actually point their way in, believe it or not, because 55 points is not that big of a deal to make up. But yeah, the cutoff line is starting to get interesting. All right, that is all I've got for you on this one. If you got a question, comment, or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section. Wasn't able to get to all the comments or make as many videos last week as I wanted to, but I will try to get to all the comments this week. If you made it this far, feel free to subscribe down below. All your subscriptions mean a lot to this channel. And if you're already subscribed, you know I appreciate you all as well. If you want to support the channel, check out the merch store right here. All kinds of really cool gear. And other than that, thanks for your time. Peace. Link is in the description for the merch store. I forgot to say that.